It's a beautiful night, right?
It's beautiful.
It's the
Absolutely.
summer solstice.
I know.
It's such a
how
perfect
exciting.
night for this.
Yeah.
And to be out here walking the dirt roads of Vermont.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long walk.
It's been a long walk to get here, but we're happy that we're here.
We're here, and here we are at All Things Gardening Live to you and to everyone. And we're here to see Marian and Ben at their house in Berlin, and we're going to take a look at their gardens, and we're going to see what we can do to perhaps help them a little bit.
Yeah. You're Charlie Nardozzi.
And I'm Charlie Nardozzi, and you're...
I'm Mary Engisch. And
You've
folks,
heard our voices.
Yeah, they might be used to hearing us on the radio. So this is really fun to actually get out in the real world and visit real gardeners in Vermont, and especially Marian and Ben, who have sort of inherited a property.
Yes, yeah, we're going to hear their whole story, and in fact, they're right over there. Hi, how are you guys?
Hi.
Hey, Charlie and Mary.
Welcome to Berlin.
Well, thanks. It's nice to be here. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
No problem. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, so you were one of the over 100 entries to participate in this All Things Gardening Live, and we chose you because your story was so perfect, you might say.
Great.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how long you've been here and the whole story about getting here and the previous owners.
Yeah, happy to. So we moved here in October of last year, the end of October. So this is really our first growing season at the house, which is pretty exciting. We bought the house from a woman named Judy, who is a fantastic gardener and really did a lot with the land, obviously.
As you can see, right?
Yeah, and we're just really excited to be able to share it with you all, and I think ask you some questions about how we can maintain it. I think, you know, the call for gardeners was a new homeowner who was feeling a little overwhelmed about the gardens, and I think we'll show that, but we're also really excited to be able to sort of act as stewards for what Judy did here.
Oh, good. That's nice. Yeah, so as we walk around, if you have questions, and if anyone at home has questions, definitely let us know, because we'll answer the questions live as we're going. And of course, remember, this is the internet. So if for some reason things just go down, hang with us. We'll get right back up again, and we'll be right back on the air. So this is a beautiful garden, and this is probably an example of some of the things that Judy did, having the oriental poppies and the lupins blooming in here. So you could see already there are some little seed pods of things going by, right? That you were asking about. And these little seed pods that are over here, these, of course, are the lupin seeds. And what's fun about lupin seeds, of course, is that's how they spread. And so just leaving them here on the plant and letting them just kind of drop and spread around, you can turn this into a whole lupin meadow, and you could be locally known as the lupin lady.
Sounds great. A great name for us. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And we love the pop of color, too, with the ornamental poppies. It's
right.
Really nice.
Yeah, the ornamental poppies, oriental poppies, really add a lot of pop of color. It's nice. And then, like any perennial garden, you can see there are things that'll be coming up afterwards, too, and it'll change through the seasons. And so one of the things it's nice to suggest for a new gardener in a new place is to take pictures. So just taking pictures now, and then every couple weeks taking photos, so that in the winter, when you have lots of time to dream about your gardens, you'll be able to look back and see, oh, that's what was blooming then, or this time period didn't have anything blooming. We should try to find something that would go in there.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've tried to take a picture every time I see something new pop up, so that's been
That's
really
a great
fun.
idea, Ben. Yeah, anytime you see something new, or if you're not sure what it is, you know, take a picture of it and then you can try to get it identified. That's a really nice thing. But this is a great way to have people come into your yard and really feel welcome, because it's such a beautiful garden.
Yeah, we've had neighbors come by who have said how beautiful it is, and have also shared that, you know, Judy used to put out flowers for folks and free flowers and divide perennials. So I think it's really a beautiful space to share with the neighborhood.
So there's a precedent already.
Oh, certainly, yes.
The pressure is on.
I think it adds to the pressure.
Well, don't feel like you have to do it the first year, but by the second year. Well, let's take a look around. You know, you have how many acres here?
4.
4 acres. We're not going to walk all 4 acres, believe me. But we do want to walk around a little bit and see some of the different areas you have, and maybe some of the areas that we could help you with a little bit.
Great.
Yeah, so I think maybe the front of the house, I see something big that's blooming over there. I mean, really big. We can wander over there and just take a look at that, and let's look at some of the shrubs that are there too. One of the things you can always think about when you have a big landscape like this and you're not sure you have time, because I believe both of you are working, right?
Yeah.
So you don't really have a lot of free time.
Right.
Is to try to shrink things down. And I know that Judy had big gardens here, but she might have had a lot more time to take care of them. So mowing to make the islands a little bit smaller, removing some of the islands, even things like this, which I probably is an old stump, you know, kind of getting that ground out or something so you can mow down it. But even in the front of the house like this is a beautiful deep border right in the front here along the foundation of the house. But if you actually shrunk it down a little bit, it would make it a little more accessible. And one of the nice things Judy did here is she has this hydrangea here and a boxwood and an azalea and that plant, which we're going to try to figure out in a minute. But those big plants take up space and they don't have as much maintenance to them as opposed to a lot of these perennials that are moving around in the landscape. But that brings up the topic of this big plant. And one thing you can do is you can identify it now with
your phone.
Your phone, there it is. Okay, you ready? On the count of three, all three of us are going to try to identify this. Do you have an app for this?
I actually just use a feature on my phone. If you have an iPhone, you can identify it just with taking a photo.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I have an app that it's called Picture This, and you take a picture of it.
Okay.
And then
We'll give it a shot.
Right. We'll all give it a shot. And what's fun about these is that it gives you a rough idea, but often maybe not the right idea. For example, this one is called Giant Knotweed. We don't want that. But it is kind of related to it. If you look really closely at this plant, this giant 6-foot-tall plant, it has the different nodes there, different segments that are very much like a Japanese knotweed. What did your app say?
I got two results. One was a willow weed. And the other is a meadow sweet.
Meadow sweet. That's not.
I don't think that's what it is. But this picture.
That looks more like it. Yeah. And that, what is that one?
Persicaria polymorpha.
Oh, Persicaria. Yeah. So it's in the smartweed family. So it is kind of related to the knotweeds. It grows obviously really tall, 6 foot tall. Big white flowers to it. It doesn't spread though like knotweed, so that's a good thing.
That is good.
Yeah, but it is a good big herbaceous plant to have in the landscape because believe it or not, that dies back to the ground every year and then grows up to be that tall. So that's pretty cool to have it around. So using a plant app just to kind of ID what you have is always kind of like a first step that you have in here. And do you have any sense of what you might have for the rest of these plants that are here?
Yeah, I think we had some poppies that are a little, or excuse me, peonies that are a little spent at this point.
Yeah.
And of course the lupins and the valerium in the back there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what these tall ones are, but they are just
the ones
starting
right here?
to send up flowers.
Yeah, these are called Heliopsis. It's a kind of sunflower. It has a nice yellow daisy-like flower on it, and that's a really nice one to have. And you can see how they planted it en masse. So you have one plant that's covering a big area, and that's another nice way to fill up space. Instead of having a lot of different plants in one of these, one of those, put a lot of plants together of the same type. And it has a much bigger impact. So when all that's flowering, it's going to be stunning. People will be driving slowly by your house, taking pictures. One of the downsides of this plant, though, you have to watch out is it gets these little red aphids on it. So that's something to kind of keep an eye out for as you're going through it. And you have some phlox in the back, which is nice. So, you know, this is a nice garden as it is already. I don't really see a lot of weeds to it. Yeah.
So our listeners and watchers would love some close-ups of all of these different ones. So if we can...
Sure.
And the ones that you're talking about.
Like the Persicaria?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Just to get a little closer and you can show...
Would you like me to pose
the flower parts and the... Oh, there you go.
Yeah, my app didn't actually work this time.
So yes, this Persicaria has beautiful white flowers to it. Really attractive this time of year. And I think that's pretty much it as far as the show goes for the Persicaria. So this is we caught it at a good time. But really fleshy plant and almost bamboo-like stems. They're hollow stems. In fact, when we get down to the backyard, we'll see some old ones.
Some ones that have dried, yeah.
Right.
Is there any other uses for this particular kind of plant? Or is it just, it does what it does, it dies back and grows again?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's kind of it. It takes up a lot of space, which is nice. It's kind of like plume poppies do this and some of the other really big herbaceous perennials.
Yeah,
the flowers.
right.
And do that.
Makes a nice screen too for the front of the
right.
house. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and these are the Heliopsis, of course, not flowering yet, but you can see they're going to be little yellow sunflowers eventually. Probably another week or so, they'll be coming out. And beautiful plant, easy to spread around. And that's another nice thing you can do with them is that if you really love this plant, you can divide it and move it to some other areas of your house, which is nice to kind of keep it all together.
When's a good time to divide plants like these?
So this one is probably best to divide it in the spring when it first comes out of the ground. Generally, things that bloom later are probably better divided in the spring, and things that bloom early, like a peony, you divide in the fall. That's kind of like the rule of thumb you do with herbaceous perennials. Yeah, so, this area, the only thing I would really suggest is just kind of pushing it back a little bit if it feels like too much, but if you're happy with it the way it is, let's let it flower. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Charlie, can you answer a couple of questions as we're strolling through Ben and Marion's garden? Carol is asking some questions about the poppies that we just walked by. Should I pull away yellowing poppy leaves, and should I leave pods on the poppies?
Oh, that's a good question. So this is Carol. Right? If you have yellowing leaves, because what poppies do is that they will eventually start yellowing and die, and eventually just die back in the summer. That's what they'll end up doing. So the yellowing leaves would be a sign that it's doing that, and which is appropriate for this time of year. If you leave the pods on there, they'll start self-sowing. And so if you remember back over there, they're kind of spread all over the place. Some of those probably were self-sown poppies that just kind of sowed themselves over time. And sometimes you get kind of fun color variations when you do that, because they naturally cross and do kind of fun things. So you could leave the pods on, or if you want to keep it nice clean looking, or if the plant is not very strong, I would cut the pods off because they do take energy away from the roots of the plant.
Here's another poppy question from Betsy. Betsy says, how can I find oriental poppies? Can they be separated? Oriental poppies are available in nurseries all over the place, but don't come to Marion and Ben's garden and try to steal them because they don't transplant well. They have a taproot. And so you'll dig them up, you put them in your yard, you'll feel really good about it, and then they'll die. And then lupins, which we also saw in that first main garden. E. Harris is asking, I'm getting little green bugs on my lupins. Help, what do I do?
Little green bugs are like the little red bugs I was talking about here. Those are probably aphids. And so it's okay to have some aphids in there because you want to keep an ecological balance, and that'll encourage ladybugs to come in, for example, and start eating on the aphids. But if there's a lot of them and they seem to really be affecting the foliage, then you can spray with an insecticidal soap or something pretty benign that will knock them down. Sometimes you can even just take a hose and just spray them and just knock them off. And once you've knocked them off the plant, they tend not to climb back up again.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Let's keep
them
walking.
Coming. That's why we're
Thanks
here.
for your questions. Definitely keep them coming.
So we'll wander down here. I remember seeing something else that you have. And we're now moving to like the north side of the house.
Right. Yeah. So we've got some ferns here that I think like the more shady part of the house. So that's a fun change a little bit. But then we have
with the big maple tree.
Right.
But you've got this plant, which is called Agapodium, which is a nice botanical name. It sounds really beautiful, but really it's it's a weed. It's goutweed or bishop's weed.
Oh no!
And it starts here, and it continues, and it continues.
It's really taken over the side of the house.
And it continues. There used to be daylilies here, I can tell that. And it continues, and it goes all the way down here. So I would not be surprised if when Judy first planted this, it was just a few little patches of it, and now it's kind of taken over the world. And that's what it does. It's this version of it, this variegated version, is called Snow on the Mountain, which makes it seem even more quaint. But it can be a thug. And you can see how it's taking over the daylilies there, and the irises are still blooming over there, but it's kind of crowding them out too. Eventually it will just kind of take this whole area over. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. And you can remove some of these things that have popped up here, the valerian and a few other kinds of plants that are popped up. But if you do want to get rid of part of it or something, it's not easy to get rid of because it has underground roots, and if you just cut it down, it'll just sprout back up. If you dig it out and don't get all the roots, it'll sprout back up. If you cover it over with newspaper or cardboard, eventually it decomposes and it sprouts back up. So you get the idea. It likes to sprout back up. So probably the best way to try to get rid of it is draw a line in the sand, as you might say. Decide this area from here over I don't want, so I'm going to cut it all down and maybe repeat cut it all summer long, so you really try to exhaust the roots. And then put like a tarp over it or something and leave the tarp there for a year, maybe even 2 years. And then after a year or two, pull it up. You'll see it'll still pop up, but it'll be very weakened by then. And then you can pull it out. And then the key thing is pulling out as much of it as you can, as well as putting down some edging between where the other patch of it is and where the new clean patch is, so it doesn't creep back in. So if you do want to take that on, go ahead.
Sounds like a big summer task for us.
It's a big summer task.
What do you mean by edging? Just something to separate it?
Oh, edging, yeah. So some kind of separation. So you'll find like rubber edging.
Okay.
But that's not going to work for this because the roots will go right underneath it.
Gotcha.
So really what you want is have something deep, like a foot or two deep. It could be wood. You can use it. It won't last forever, but it'll last long enough to keep it away. But metal will be ideal. If you can just happen to have sheet metal around or some old corrugated metal that goes down a foot or so, bury it down there so it can't really get in very easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, great.
Great. There's another bit of a question. Yeah,
Okay.
this is sort of related to the lupins that we were just chatting about a second ago. Can you save those seeds? And is it okay to take them off now to save those seeds?
Yes, so you can't save the seeds, but you want to wait till they turn brown, the pods turn brown. Right now, the ones we are looking at are still green, so you want to let them dry on the plant, but not open. So it's kind of, you have to watch them. Go there every day, every half day, every couple hours, whatever, and watch when they start turning brown and rattling around a little bit, and then you can store them. And the key is, if you want to grow them, you need to put them in the refrigerator for a while this winter, because they need to have that cold dormancy period like they normally would have if they dropped on the ground. And then in the spring, you would plant them in your greenhouse, if you happen to have one. They do. Or just in some containers in the soil, and then they'll germinate. Or you can just let them drop, or you can spread them this fall, wherever you want them, and just let Mother Nature do it all, because that's how they naturally spread anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Cool.
Nice. So this is All Things Gardening Live. We are here in Berlin with Marian and Ben. If you're joining us a little bit later, stay with us. If the internet goes down or anything, we're going to be coming right back. This is all getting recorded too. So if you're saying, oh my God, my friend would love this show, you can watch it on the YouTube channel for Vermont Public later. We're moving over to these beasts over there. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on here, Marian and Ben?
We have some massive lilac bushes. Most of the flowers are spent already, but just a month or so ago, they were beautiful lilac bushes. We could smell them through the house and really got a lot of enjoyment out of them.
So you still like them?
Yes, we do like them, but they're quite big, and I think, you know, if we're standing under them, you can barely see the tops of them. So.
Yes, hard to harvest some to put in a bouquet in a vase.
Yep.
Right. And also what happens when they get big is that the bottom kind of dies off, and so probably the initial idea was, which was a good one, to have them as a screening for the road, is no longer working anymore. So you have some choices. Well, first of all, we should talk about lilacs in general. They're a spring blooming shrub, obviously, and if you want to prune them just a little bit, you know, just to bring the height down a little bit, the time to do it is now. In fact, you only have maybe another week or two, because they will set their flower buds for next year about anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks after they're done flowering. So usually by the end of June, early July, that's when they're setting their flower buds. So if you prune later, like in July or August, you're pruning off the flowers for next year. But
so pressure's on.
Yeah, good thing to remember.
Yes.
But in this case, it doesn't really matter, because your flowers are way up there. So in this case, to bring the whole thing down, you can do one of two things. You can do the drastic method, depending on your personality, the drastic method, or the step-by-step, little bit at a time method. The drastic one would be to cut down these shrubs to about a couple feet tall. Just literally get a chainsaw or a big saw, cut them right down, let all those suckers grow up, and it'll take 2 or 3 years probably before they get big enough to start flowering again, but they'll be a small shrub. So you can do that, or you can do what we call a 3-year rotational pruning, and I'll show you a little bit of how to do that. I happen to have my saw with me. So with a 3-year rotational pruning, what you're going to do is you look and see how many main stems you have. You can see you have here, you got a lot. And every year you want to take a third of them out. So you just decide which ones you want to take out for the first year. And as you take them out, you're going to get a lot more of these sprouts and suckers coming up. They're over there and over there. And those are going to be your replacement plants for when you're done doing this whole rotational pruning. So the first year you take the first third out, second year the second third. By the end of the third year, you should have enough of these that are big enough that it'll actually start flowering. So you don't really skip a beat. And when you're cutting them back, you can, again, cut them all the way back to the ground if you want, down to here, or you can leave a little bit of a stump. And you don't mind if I do a little of this?
Go for it. Saw away.
So just cut them right out. This is a really nice saw for this kind of work, as long as I don't break it. I'm going to come around this way and get it because it's getting a little bound in there. And there it is.
Success.
There it
So then, of
goes.
course, you just pull them out.
Wow.
This is a great thing to do with a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
And take them all down.
That is
There we go.
immense.
Wow.
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 Back from the hunt. So that would be the process of rotationally pruning this one, is take out a third at a time, eventually getting it down to a height that would be manageable. And then also pruning out some of these that are kind of weak and not as strong as some of the other ones. So you could do that with this little hand pruner, just going in. And you want to leave maybe, for every one you take out, maybe a couple of them, so that eventually you can have them in here. So something that's really tight to the shrub, you might want to take out way down here. But something that's out here a little bit, like this is not bad, I would just clean it up a little bit. And that's going off in a nice direction. And that could be something that would be flowering for you in a couple of years once you've opened it up and you get enough light in there. And things that are hitting your hat, you might want to take those out too.
Does that make good kindling, or what's a good use for these trees? Limbs once you're...
You can turn them into brush piles,
Yeah.
which is really a nice thing to do because brush piles are great for wildlife. You can have mice and birds and foxes and all kinds of critters and rabbits hanging out in there. So that would be a nice use for them. Or you can chop them up and use them as kindling for firewood. And that would be fine too. Yeah, so that's a big project. But
Yeah.
like I said, get the family up, get some friends up, and just kind of go right through it. Or just get a chainsaw and just go at it someday and just cut them all down. But the sooner you do that, the sooner you'll get a nice sized shrub that'll provide that block.
If we wanted to, or what's the recommended way to sort of propagate lilacs, or can you divide them? Or
Well, the best
if we
way
wanted
is
multiply them?
over here is a good example of it. Now we're getting a little dark. But you can see how these little shoots are coming off the main one. This is a root. So I would just get a sharp spade and dig around there and just remove that. And that little sucker would be a new lilac plant.
Oh, great.
So if you wanted to put more of them in here, so for example, once you cut all these down, you decide you want 2 layers of lilacs, you can be digging up some of these suckers as you go and planting them inside or planting them in between and creating an even bigger hedgerow eventually. And that's probably the easiest way. You can take cuttings and stuff, but that way you get a plant that's got roots and is all ready to go.
Here's a related lilac question for you,
Sure.
Charlie, from Brian. Can those lilac cuttings be rooted?
Yes, so that's not going to be rooted. But yes, you can take cuttings of them and root them, but they're not the easiest things to root. You'd have to use a rooting hormone powder on them, and then getting them in a place where it has enough humidity, and eventually they'll form roots. So that's why doing the suckers and dividing the suckers off from the mother plant is probably the best thing to do. Yeah.
And while we're on
And
the
more?
pruning topic,
Sure,
yes,
of course.
Betsy is asking, do you do that 1/3 pruning for large hydrangeas too?
You can, yeah. So like the panicle hydrangeas, the ones that get really big, I call them the cemetery plants because that's you often see them. You could do the same thing, the same kind of pruning. Those will rebloom a lot faster than a lilac. So if you do cut it all the way down, they will rebloom a little bit quicker. Yeah.
Do we want to walk and I'll ask you a bunch of questions? Or
Sure, walk and talk. I can do that.
We'll see if I can walk and talk and ask questions. This one is sort of more related to the ground cover because you were just talking about how quickly that spreads. How do you get rid of dock This is from E. Harris.
Dock. Yes, I'm assuming curly dock and those kinds of dock,
Yeah,
yellow dock.
so, yep.
Yeah. So those are tap-rooted weeds with those big leaves. You've probably seen curly dock. It looks kind of like a rhubarb almost. And it can be eaten, actually. Burdock is another one where you can eat the roots of them. It tastes pretty good. But they're probably not interested in that.
They're not looking for your recipe for dock.
No, they're not looking for the recipe. So the best thing to do with those is to dig them out. And you just have to be diligent about them. And don't let them flower and don't let them form their little seed pods because that's how you get dock everywhere. And then it's a lot more work to kind of get rid of them.
Another ground cover question from Valerie. Do you have a suggestion for a native ground cover for a south-facing hillside that gets full sun? This is for Zone 6A near Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh? Okay. South-facing ground cover gets a lot of sun.
Yep.
Okay. In Pittsburgh. Well, sun-loving ground covers. You could try something like a Pachysandra. That might work in that kind of situation. The Japanese kind of ground cover, it would work. You know, Vinca likes a little bit of shade. If it's, depending on how big an area, if it's a smallish kind of area, you can use something like the creeping sedums. If it's a really well-drained area, they like a lot of sun. Anything in that sedum family with those succulent leaves are really good for that. And then if it's a place you're just letting something go crazy on, mint. Oh, because we all know how mint gets, right?
Yes.
Mint gets crazy. So if you're not worried about it growing into anything else, just kind of make a whole hillside of mint. And then you can roll in it.
And mow it. And it smells good when you mow it, too. You can mow over it, right?
Right.
Nice. Amy wants to know, I know you want young asparagus to grow into ferns, but can you let larger asparagus grow into ferns as well? Currently fighting asparagus beetles.
Okay. So yes, whenever your asparagus starts getting the diameter is less than a pencil width, you should let it just grow to fern. So whether they're a big one or a little one, it doesn't really matter. Let it grow to fern because at that point, that's when their energy is kind of running out and they need to rejuvenate themselves. And as far as the asparagus beetle goes, that is a tough one. That's a little red beetle that you'll often will see. I don't think you have asparagus here.
No, we don't.
Well, you probably will at some point. I have a sense about that.
Yes.
It's in the plans. A little red beetle that lays eggs on the ferns, and they turn into these squishy little larvae, little caterpillars, that will defoliate the ferns, which takes energy away from the plant. So the best thing to do is when you see the red beetles, they're really obvious, is to go out there and squish them. That helps. I've done that. Go out there in the morning with your cup of coffee when they're a little sluggish. Don't let them drop in your coffee, and just squish them. And for the little larvae, you could spray something like an insecticidal soap or neem oil to kill them. But again, if you can just squish them, what I do, which might be a little gross for some people, I take one of the ferns, I put my hand around it because it's very flexible, pliable, and I just run my hand up, and if there's any of those guys in there, they're all squished all over my hand. It's a gardener thing.
What's a good full shade colorful ground cover for Berlin?
Oh, for Berlin. Did you?
What could we replace that goutweed with?
Yeah.
We planted that
Did you plant that question?
Just kidding. One of our neighbors obviously did.
A full shade ground cover for Berlin. Well, you could try Vinca. So something like that north side we were over, the Vinca would work well because that takes a lot of shade and does pretty well. There is a mint called Meehan's mint, M-E-E-H-A-N. It's a type of mint that flowers in the shade, actually. It does really well under trees, too. That's another one you can look out for and see. And then things like sweet woodruff would do okay in that condition, or the dreaded lily of the valley. Another one that does spread, but if you have a spot where you can kind of keep it under control, it's really nice and has really fragrant flowers in the spring.
Great.
Can we walk and talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll see, but yes.
Oh, and you were asking me about these, Marion and Ben, too. What's happening over here?
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to fill in where these big trees here were thinning out, so we planted some cedar trees. We planted a black oak and a maple somewhere behind us. And yeah, we're out here watering them every day and doing what we can. But this one here isn't doing so great, so I don't know if you have anything.
Oh well, it happens. I can't tell you how many trees I've killed.
Yeah.
Keeping it well watered is probably a good idea. Sometimes they don't have as strong a root system as some of the transplants, so that might help them too. But things do die for sure. So But it's a good idea what you're doing because, like the lilacs, these spruces have gotten too old and too big, and all the bottom branches have died off. So you could see the neighbor's house, you could see the road. You know, you don't have the privacy you used to have. So putting things like cedars in here. Another thing that would do really well here is rhododendrons and azaleas because they like a little bit of shade, and they're again on the north side, and they're evergreens. You do have to watch if you have deer. I don't know if you have deer.
We do have deer. This tends
you
to be a
have
deer
deer
highway.
in Berlin?
Yeah, they like to
Yeah.
sleep in the field down there.
Oh,
so
they
we
sleep
see
in the
them come
field.
through
I
here.
see. You provided bedding for them
Yes,
too.
we're
Do you
a
feed them
regular
in the
deer
morning?
hotel.
No.
Certainly
Yes.
not.
Deer Airbnb.
Deer Airbnb. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good you put the fences around these little guys.
Yeah.
You'd have to do the same with a rhododendron in this situation. But anything that's bushy, that'll really look nice in here. You could try things like 9-bark and Weigela, some of the other kind of bigger shrubs. The hydrangea that someone just asked a question about would do okay in this situation. And I don't think deer, they haven't really bothered my hydrangea too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a Vermont question, I think. How
Sure.
close to the road should we be concerned about snow drifts and plowing?
Plowing the
that sort of
road,
thing?
yeah.
Too, right?
And salt, yeah.
Yeah, and salt. So you're a good 10, 15 feet off the road there with those new plants. So I think that's fine.
So on this side then?
So I
the
would say
plants.
on this side of these spruces.
Marion
yeah.
did plant a bush over
We
there.
do have some
so
bushes over there. So
I thought
now-
Oh,
that
you
was
do?
kind of
Well-
questionable.
You can see how they do. It's not so much the salt is going to be the issue, is that the snowplow itself might hit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Because a lot
I
of
could see
times
it
you
being in a
notice how they
snowbank.
plow in a little bit, especially early in the season, so they have room for more snow to
Right.
come.
Okay. Well,
So they might take them out. They might solve your
well,
problem
we might
right
just
there.
sacrifice some to the garden gods.
Exactly. So my eye, being a gardener, went right to that pile over there. It's a pile of brown stuff just hanging out by itself. And it always gets me excited when I see some way.
We didn't think this pile would
composting.
get the light of day. But we're now putting it on live stream.
I'm putting
so.
it right on the spotlight here. Tell me about your pile.
Well, most of this was here already when we moved
Okay.
in, so I think it has always been a pile to dump, garden clippings and leaves. But we moved in the end of October, so we
Yeah.
had a couple of weeks to really pick up some leaves, and so we dumped them here.
Nice. Well, this is the beginnings of, or if not the end of it too, of a leaf mold pile, which is a great way to create compost for your garden. And since you have some big trees around here that drop a lot of leaves,
Yes.
you can harvest them and just put them into a pile like this. And then after a year or two, in fact, if we dig around a little bit, let's see here. Down, well, there's a lot of twigs in here, but you get the idea just by looking at this right there, that this is beginnings of leaf mold, and it's kind of turning into compost. And I would give it a little more time. This is still kind of woody, and it's got a lot of needles and things in it. But this is great compost. It may take a couple years just if you leave it. If you want to speed it up a little bit, you can shred all the leaves, run them through a shredder or a chipper of some type, as well as some of these branches and things, like if you cut the lilacs down. And that will speed up that whole process of things decomposing. But what's really cool about this stuff is that it's very rich in nutrients. And even if it's partially broken down like this, it still has the pine needles and things in it. It's still usable. And that's one of the fallacies about this. People think that pine needles make the soil acidic. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. They don't. If you have a lot of pine needles on the ground, the soil right below that ground, like the first inch or so, would get acidic. But when it starts breaking down like this, it becomes more neutral, and so you can use it on any plant.
Great.
Yeah. So that's new stuff. Nice stuff. I like
Hey,
it.
Charlie, would you ever introduce some earthworm activity into something like this, or is that not necessary?
They'll probably find it.
Yeah.
For sure. But what you could do with this is try to make it a little more manageable. So putting pallets around it or wire or something to kind of enclose it a little bit more. And that kind of makes it easier to mix it up if you want to do that and use it that way. Yeah. I noticed the former owner has a sifter over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thing to have, especially if you have compost that still has a lot of woody things. I was picking out some of that woody stuff. You can just throw that compost through that sifter and then just get the real nice material and not all the woody stuff.
Here's another question about compost. Would
Sure.
you put something like this on lilacs? And if so, do you do that when you're pruning them?
Putting the compost down? Yeah, if they're new lilacs, I would do that. I would put some compost around them. If they're old ones like they have over here, I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't waste my compost on them. Put them on annual flowers or vegetables, other things that are going to need a lot of nutrients really quickly.
Yep.
Things like shrubs and trees do best if you put wood chips around the base of them, because they break down slowly and they're more fungal oriented, which is what the roots of those trees and shrubs really like, versus annual flowers and vegetables are more bacterial organism oriented. They like something that breaks down fast. Grass clippings, things like that. Yeah.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, so if you've got questions, that's kind of what we're doing. If you haven't figured that out, it's All Things Gardening Live. We're here in Berlin, and we're wandering around in the wilds of Berlin now, in the wood mulch and everything else. And of course, we are on the internet, so if it drops off for some reason, don't go away. And at the end of it, we're going to have a lightning round of questions. Probably something like that,
Yep.
yeah. So if you have questions that aren't getting answered, we'll be sitting down and answering all kinds of questions, not just related to Marion and Ben's property, but whatever's going on in your yard.
Yep.
Yeah. Where to next?
I think we're headed that direction.
Up over the hill. Okay. Great.
You should put a little mini golf course in here.
Disc
you want
golf.
more
We have
mowing.
some neighbors that have some disc golf courses.
Yeah, there you go.
nice.
I can see that happening.
What's the mowing situation like for you and Ben?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, who mows?
Yeah, I do a little bit.
Yeah, we just got a ride-on tractor, lawnmower. And then we also have a little electric push mower that we like to use too, just to kind of finish stuff up.
Nice.
But it's certainly a lot of mowing.
Yeah, it's a
so
lot
I
of
think
mowing.
Yeah.
long term, thinking about how we can mow less would be great.
Right, right. And you got a good start by putting in some of these trees and shrubs and really kind of thinking about that as far as filling in the landscape and deciding what areas you want to keep open and which areas you want to just let it go back to forest.
Right, right.
Because ultimately everything here in Vermont wants to be a forest.
Right.
So if you waited long enough, that's what would happen.
Charlie, I have a question for you from Susan.
Okay.
Susan says, I have a compost box, but stuff doesn't break down enough to have actual compost. I add kitchen scraps to it, but what else can I do?
Oh, so this is a kitchen scrap composter. Yeah, yeah. So one of the things you could do, Susan, is to mix in some brown materials with all the kitchen scraps, because the kitchen scraps tend to be a green material and really wet. And think of the things you throw in there, old grapefruits and banana peels and stuff that really are slimy. So if you can put in something that's going to break down fast, like hay or straw or grass clippings that are brown and old, or even some compost or some potting soil, whatever, mix that in every time you put some stuff in the composter, and then mix it up a little bit once in a while too, and that'll help break it down faster and turn it into more usable compost.
Cool.
Great. Speaking of compost, my gardening eye sees a bag over there. What's
Yes.
going on over here, Marion?
Well, we, having you in our garden, thought we would do some transplanting or planting.
Oh, free labor.
Yes, exactly. Our friends Lauren and Matt graciously gave us 3 chokeberries, Aronias, and I think we're going to plant one of them.
Oh, nice. Great. Well, Aronia is a great shrub. It's nice of them to let you dig it up and bring it over
super
here.
nice.
It's a nice wildlife shrub. It has those black berries on it. It gets up maybe 3-4 feet tall and wide. Deer might nibble on it a little bit, but not terribly so. But it's a good topic to bring up because a lot of people don't realize the best way to plant a shrub or a tree, especially if you buy it, and I know you dug this from your neighbors, but if you get it from a nursery or a garden center, it's often in a pot or in a ball and burlap. So what we're going to do, maybe I can have you do some of the work,
Sure.
and I'll do show and tell. How about that?
Great.
So this is the Aronia that she dug up. And this is the root ball of it. And normally, what we would do is, if we had a hose, we would just soak it down and knock all the soil off. But we can just kind of knock it off with our hands here. The idea is that we want to look at the root system. And we don't want to have roots that are circling around the plant. And if you have them circling around the plant, I'm just going to knock it all off like this. And this is okay for the plant, really. Truly, I'm not killing your Aronia. If you have roots that are circling around, what they'll eventually do as the plant gets older is they'll strangle the plant. And this often happens with street trees a lot of times that have been growing 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and all of a sudden they just die. And then they dig them up and they look at the roots and they see that there's a main root that's circling around. So what you do is just look and see and make sure there's no roots doing that. And this one looks pretty good. I don't really see anything that's like that. And then once you have it out and you've pulled out the weeds there, maybe you can grab some soil.
Sure.
And we're going to place it in here. And you want to put it at the same height as it was in the ground or in the container.
Okay.
And so, Ben could be holding it while you do it, or vice versa, however you want to do it.
Do you want to hold it then? And I can dump the soil in?
And you can dump some soil in. And as long as you have pretty good soil, which it looks like you have, there's no need to amend it to put in compost or anything like that. You can just put down back the native soil, as long as you have enough of it.
Well, we can add some more. For the
And you can add some more that you have in the wheelbarrow there, too. But the idea of holding it up like this is so you can keep the roots spread out, going out in directions away from the center of that plant. And if you have like a real clay soil, you might even want to mound it up a little bit higher than the soil level that is, because you want to have good water drainage. That's really a big issue with clay soils that a lot of people have in Vermont. But if you have just sandy soil, then you can do it right at the ground level, not too much higher. And yeah, you're doing a good job.
Might have to dump the wheelbarrow.
You might have to just dump the whole wheelbarrow in there. That's good. Nice. And what you can do is if you have water, to just keep the hose running, or I'll just push it down gently with my foot. You just want to have some nice contact with the roots in the soil.
Go for it.
And Ben, yeah, go ahead. Just dump the whole
Why not? Right?
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. There we go. So now you've got your plant about the same depth as it was when you dug it up. Keep it really well watered, maybe put some mulch around it, and just keep it watered all summer long. That's the key thing. A lot of people think that you just do it once and then you're done, but really you want to keep watering it, probably a 5-gallon bucket once or twice a week,
Okay.
especially if it doesn't rain.
Right.
And that'll keep it nice and moist, and it should be fine.
Great.
Nice.
Awesome.
Congratulations, you have a new tree.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. You have to give it a name now.
Well, we'll call it Lauren. Thanks, Lauren.
Lauren. Okay, Lauren, there you go. Let's talk veggies. Oh, you got a question?
I have a question from Carol as we're walking
Okay.
over to the veggie garden here.
Sure.
Carol has recently dug up a bunch of dandelions from the lawn. Wants to know, can those go in a compost pile, or is that just going to make things worse?
Or in a stir fry. I love dandelion greens. They are edible, Carol. No, it shouldn't be a problem, but you do want to make sure that the flowers haven't gone to those little puffy things that blow off all over, because that's the seeds.
Yep.
And so if you're digging them up and there's still the yellow dandelions, not a problem. They'll break down. They probably won't root themselves. If you're really concerned about it, you can chop them up a little bit.
Great.
And put them in there.
Cool.
Yeah, great. So this does not look like part of the original property.
No, we added this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think beautiful gardens and wanted some more things to take care of, but all jokes aside, there's nothing better than a sun-ripe tomato, so wanted to add a little bit of garden space to grow some food that we could eat here.
Great, yeah. And you were very smart to put up a fence.
Yes.
Because you mentioned the deer yard that's around there.
Yes.
But there is one other thing. I don't know if you've seen any rabbits around.
We haven't seen any
Or
rabbits,
woodchucks?
but we have been seeing woodchucks, or what I call the dirt volcanoes, maybe from Wolz, where you kind of see it bubble up in the ground. You can see some evidence of it here.
Okay.
So we definitely have something tunneling.
Yeah, okay, some tunneling kind of animals. Well, especially if you have rabbits and woodchucks, you could do another fence, a lower fence like this one, that we happen to have some chicken wire here. So these holes are nice for bigger animals, but if you get something like a rabbit or even a small woodchuck, they can squeeze themselves through those, believe it or not. So they can get right in. So in order to prevent them from coming in, you can get some chicken wire, probably a little bit taller than this. Put half of it up on the side, and then the other half down on the ground. So it's like an L shape, like that. And then you can either dig it in if you want, or you can just put a bunch of wood chips on top of it. What'll happen is that when the rabbit or the woodchuck comes up to that fence, their natural inclination is to dig down. And they'll dig down and they'll hit the apron. And then if they're a woodchuck and they're a young woodchuck, they can climb and they'll start climbing up. So the other thing you could do if you have woodchuck problems is release these top clamps that are on this post here, so that the fence is floppy. And so when they get to the top and it's really floppy, the weight of them pulls it back down, and they go back out here. Then they'll whistle at you and they'll run away. So that's something just to keep in mind if you start seeing that kind of damage that's there. It's a nice little trick to keep them out.
Great.
I think we might need a gate to keep them out too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would probably help too.
That's the next step.
Even though rabbits, I once had a garden where I fenced three sides of it and left one side open, and I would watch the rabbit from our house, and they would come up to one side of it, they'd walk around a little bit, and then they couldn't figure out if they just went down and around the corner, they could get into the garden. Oh well. So this is great. It looks like you did a nice job taking care of the weeds in here.
Yeah, we dug up all the sod, most of this was grass, and laid down cardboard and then mulch over top to create a weed barrier, and then also knowing that the cardboard will eventually break down to sort of amend the soil a bit too. It's doing an okay job. There is still some milkweed coming up. It's
Oh yeah.
pretty persistent, but generally it's been working well so far.
Nice, yeah. That's all a great thing to do. One thing that would have avoided a lot of hard work for yourself is you didn't have to dig up the sod.
Right.
You could have just gone right over the top of it with the cardboard, then put all the bark mulch on top of that, and that would have been worked just as well. But yeah,
Told
it looks.
me that months ago.
Yeah, I know. And then what's this prehistoric plant you've got over here?
This is our rhubarb that
Yes,
has
it
been
is.
here since time before.
It is a big rhubarb plant.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is flowering, which it can do, and it's kind of attractive that way. It's a nice plant that way. Do you like rhubarb?
We do, as
Yeah.
much as the next person
I don't
does.
think we need this much, but yeah.
Okay.
We could survive solely on rhubarb with this plant. if we
Yes, that's it.
needed
If
to.
you only ate rhubarb, you'd be all set.
Yeah.
So one of the things you might want to do with this, since it is taking up so much space in your vegetable garden, is to divide it and cut it back. And the time to do it isn't really now. I think just enjoy it for the summer. But next spring, when it first starts coming out, and you see those round little red balls started coming
Right.
out of the ground, that will be the time to go in, dig it out, divide it. Maybe you can start Judy's tradition again and put it out on the driveway saying free rhubarb
Right.
plants and see
Sure,
if
the
anyone
neighbors
takes
will
them.
be excited. Yeah.
But that way it'll shrink it and give you more space to grow other things.
How deep do rhubarb roots go?
They go pretty deep.
They do?
Yeah,
Okay.
so this plant being as old, you might have to get a real sharp spade and kind of jump on it a bunch of times to really get down there to divide it.
Okay.
But they're really easy to divide and they'll survive pretty easily, especially if you do it in the spring. Yeah.
Great.
And you also have a nice raised bed here you put together.
Yeah, we've at least wanted one raised bed, and knowing we had a lot of tunneling animals, I put some wire on the bottom of this as well.
Oh,
But
good idea.
doing some intercropping with
Yeah.
tomatoes. Hopefully once they get big enough, they'll provide some shade to the lettuce in the heat of the summertime. We have some marigolds, basil, and nasturtium as well.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, it's nice you're doing the interplanting. That's a great idea, a good way to get a lot of things out of a small space.
Yeah.
But there's one suggestion I would have. Can you guess what it might be?
It's our rustic trellis.
It is
for the
very
foliage.
rustic. Yes, it's very rustic. And, you know, once these
A little
tomatoes get
wobbly.
up big, and they'll get up like to the top of the trellis and wide, and then you get one of our classic Vermont summer storms blowing through, thunderstorm or something, the whole thing could just topple over.
Yes.
So I would suggest reinforcing it with something a little sturdier. You could use some kind of metal bars or something on the ends, on either end, that would be attached to this wood if you want to keep the wood.
Okay.
And do it that way for this year. And then in the future, maybe do something that's more of a structure that's a wooden structure, something that's a little stronger.
Right.
Maybe even attach it right to the corners of the raised bed too.
Okay.
But it's a good idea.
That's nice.
And trellising up like this is nice. You just have to make sure you keep pruning off the
Right.
suckers. And you know about suckers. Okay,
Yes,
I won't
yeah.
show you those. I don't really see it. Oh yeah, there's some already
We've been
starting.
getting some
There's
of them
right there.
off
There's
in the
one.
mornings, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this one is already having fruit.
Yeah, it's already
which I
getting
just
fruit.
realized.
Look at that. Yeah, cool. Nice. Well, let's move on to this structure that we keep alluding to. That's right over here. And maybe you can tell us as we wander over what it is and kind of the story behind it.
Yeah, we're really lucky with the house and the land that it came with a greenhouse as well. We understand that I think, you know, the previous owners bought the greenhouse at auction and sort of built it up and put it in this spot. And I think I have plants in here. We have plants in here. It looks empty because it's such a big space, but I'm excited to make more use of it. I will say it's pretty shaded which is something we're thinking about how to deal with. It has these beautiful trees around it.
Right.
But it seems to be a shade greenhouse.
Yeah. When they were small, it probably was nice all around it, but now they're over it. So should we go inside? Should we go inside? Yeah, let's go inside. Go ahead. Thank you. Wow, what a nice space. Oh, this is great. And I love how they dug it down and put in footings all around it. You know, so you're down below the ground level, so it keeps it a little bit warmer.
Yeah, it's in the wintertime, it's really warm in here. It's really amazing.
It's a classic old greenhouse.
Yeah.
And so how does all the venting work?
It's all manual.
Oh. Well, there's your workout for the day.
Yeah, I come in here every morning with the sun.
Not very quick either. Keep cranking it. Wow. Yeah, that is old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But you have a heater over there.
Yeah, the greenhouse has heat and water and electric, so it's
Heat,
really,
water, and electric.
really full functioning.
It could be a little Airbnb. You know?
Yeah,
It's called the greenhouse.
Yes.
Nice. This is a beautiful space, and you even have the benches here that you could use. So you've got some tomatoes that are growing over there, and peppers. I think a suggestion would be if you're not willing to cut down your trees, which you probably don't want to do, the big honey locust over there and the crabapple here, is maybe use this greenhouse as like a fall, winter, spring greenhouse. So grow things through the winter. If it might be insulated enough that you can get some plants that can stay alive in here in the winter. At least, the very least you could do is take things like dahlia bulbs and tubers and store them here.
Yeah.
But as we get into February and March, towards the late winter, you can start growing seeds in here and growing plants all the way up until when things leaf out.
Right.
Because the trees that are shading it are all deciduous trees.
Yeah. Yeah, we started some seeds in our basement with a grow light, mostly because we couldn't get into the greenhouse. It was all iced over with the snow.
Oh, yeah.
But eventually, when we could move them in here, they were really happy.
Yeah.
So
It's
it
a great
worked pretty
space for doing that.
Yeah.
And then the summer, you could grow things in here in the summer that like a little shade. That's all.
Yeah.
If you wanted to really get into it and doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice space. Wow, this is, you can make big plans out of
Yes,
this thing.
we feel
Down the
very
road.
lucky to have it.
Charlie's going to move in.
Yeah.
And it looks like you got enough equipment.
We do. We have a lifetime supply of shovels.
Did you bring all those shovels with you?
No, they're all here.
We found them around in the yard.
Oh, really?
Were
Yeah, just,
scattered around, so we've been collecting them as we've discovered the property.
wow.
Yeah.
Got a greenhouse question for you, Charlie.
Sure.
Brian asks, how late in winter could greens like kale and things grow in there without a heat source?
Without a heat source. Probably November, December. Depends on the winter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it depends on how cold it gets. Excuse me.
Yeah. So that means like from seed they can start kale and other greens.
They can
and
start
things?
them like late summer, early fall.
Yeah.
We have an unheated greenhouse, and we start them September or so.
Okay.
And they'll grow up, and they'll start not growing so strong after a while because the short days more than the cold. That'll slow them down. Yeah. But then once you get them up big enough and you protect them a little bit, then you can keep them all winter sometimes, especially if you don't get a real cold snap. And what I do in our greenhouse is we use some of that row cover, that mesh material. I put that over them inside the greenhouse, and so they have double protection. And they went through, like this past winter, it got down to minus 15, minus 20. And they survived.
Stayed? Wow.
Yeah, the plants survived.
Nice.
Yeah, so definitely greenhouses are nice.
Cool. Well, should we
All right,
keep
well, let's
wandering? Which way?
Wander down here through the meadow. So this is more of the same as what we've been seeing in some of the other parts of the property?
Yeah, I think some of the same. It's really a big sort of pollinator meadow is how we've been thinking of it.
Yep.
There's definitely more milkweed here, and I think some goldenrod, but yeah, the same with the lupins. And we had some peonies in here. They're done at this point, but some of the same and some different plants as well.
Yeah. Well, you've got a lot of things coming up. Yeah, again, they use the same kind of plant palette, so some of the stuff we saw in the front of your house is back here as well, which is nice. But it is a nice big area, great for attracting butterflies and pollinating insects. It does look like it could use a little help as far as not allowing so many of the weedy things to come in.
Right.
Some of these white flowers that we see here are bladder campion, type of campion, which is, it's a nice flower, but it can get kind of weedy. It self-sows. As you look across, you can see it all over this time of night coming up. And, of course, the milkweed is a thug. This is the common milkweed. So if you do want to have milkweed in a pollinator garden and you're starting from scratch, you want to get something that's not going to spread as aggressively as this one. So there's a purple milkweed, there's a swamp milkweed, there's a world milkweed, there's a number of different species.
Okay.
And those would be better ones to get than this one because they don't spread as quickly. Unless you just want to have a big milkweed patch. Some
Right.
people just like that for the monarchs. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the pollinators, are they picky about which milkweed you've planted, or?
Not necessarily, yeah. They'll go after any of
Yeah.
them. And there's a one called the butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. And that one is a nice one for butterflies and for pollinators too. And that's a nice ornamental. That doesn't spread as much. Yeah.
Nice.
But as far as taking care of all this, there's some grassy areas. It's another one that you might decide, well, I think this is just mostly grass. I'm just going to start mowing this area and kind of shrink the whole garden down a little bit. And then pick your spots where you want to maybe do some hand weeding, like some of the Timothy grass that's growing up over there. And, well, what do you got in there? There's other things going.
All sorts of stuff.
Tires are growing in your garden.
I know.
Yeah. Those are, try to move them out, I guess. They probably had this as a separate garden area at one
think
point,
so.
and then they just let it all kind of grow up.
Yeah, we have found some herbs that seem to be growing. So I
Yeah.
think at one point it was perhaps an herb garden.
You could
or
probably
some other type of
transplant some
garden.
things. Yeah.
But could we also just mow it down in the fall and kind of let it
So as far
do
as
its meadow
once you try to
thing?
clean out some of the weedier things, the grassier things that you have, just let it stay, let it do the seeding like we talked about with the lupins and all these other plants that are growing up. It'll be flowering soon. And then probably late November will be a good time just to mow the whole thing down. And what that'll do is it'll knock down things that you can see, like there's a wild rose that's come in over here. And sometimes you get little saplings of trees starting to come in. If you don't mow it down, like I said before, everything wants to be a forest. So it'll start moving in that direction. And mowing it really late is good because that allows things to seed and allows the pollinators to find their winter homes and you're not disturbing them as much. Nice.
In terms of making things a little easier for Ben and Marion to manage, is there one space that you would have them start with? Or a little bit at a time?
Yeah, I guess it depends on you guys. Which ones what spaces you're most excited about? Do you have a favorite garden yet?
I think it's that one that we started
Yeah.
at.
The one
the
we
one
started
by the
right at the
road,
beginning,
yeah.
by the road. So, I would just focus on that. And that's a nice one because that's showy. It's right in the front. It's what people see when they first come to your yard. And maybe the front area in front of the house, too, is another real showy spot. And this could be, a lot of times when you get further away from the house, gardens can become more naturalized and just kind of, we call them meadows. They're just, I don't know what to do with it. I just let it grow. So you could just, this area could be something that's not as high a priority, but maybe the vegetable garden is, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Intentional meadow.
Intentional
Yes.
meadow, And you've got, this is curious, this tree, because this is a ginkgo tree.
Yeah.
And this really shouldn't be here. Because ginkgo trees are already at zone 5. I'm assuming we're probably at zone 4
Zone
here,
4, yeah.
because we're up high in Berlin. And you said it was really windy here?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get quite a bit of wind up here.
Right, but look at it. There it is. It's leafing out. It's alive. It's obviously old. It's been here for a while. So it's a Japanese tree. You see it used a lot as a street tree because it's really tolerant of salt and snow and winter conditions. But you do want to make sure you don't have a male and a female.
Right.
Do you know the reason for that?
I think the female will give off a really unpleasant smell. when it starts to fruit.
The fruit that comes off of it,
Right.
the female. So you do need 2 to get the fruit.
Right.
But if you get the fruit, then they drop to the ground and they smell, and then people are like, we're not going to visit them. They got a smelly yard. But you only have 1, and probably your neighbors don't have any.
We haven't seen any others, so hopefully this is the only one.
So but it's a cool tree. It's a really beautiful tree as it leaves out. Has a nice structure to it, nice leaves. Very unusual. Cool. Well, we have kind of done the whole wandering around. We're happy to stay. So we're going to sit down for a while and chat, and if you have more questions, just send them to us about anything about gardening. And we'll do that for as long as you like and enjoy it. So yeah, let's go check out your Adirondack chair.
Sure.
Those orange chairs really stand out.
It is the one nice thing with this meadow, as we'll call it, that you can sort of be so close to it and sitting by the fire pit. It's nice to look at. So we are excited about that.
Yeah, and I hear Ben has big ideas for what's going to happen here.
He does, yes.
Yeah, I've got some ideas, like maybe a little courtyard or something. We'll see.
Nice. Courtyard, put a pergola with some vines growing over the top of it. Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, I could see just having a fire here and a nice summer night.
It is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Oh, let's see. Charlie, other than marigolds, what are other natural bug deterrents? I mean, we're out here, it's the first day of summer, it's dusk, and we're noticing bugs and things, but
sure.
Marion had mentioned planting nasturtiums. Is that what's in the? So that's to keep some bugs away from the garden,
plants, right
from the
there.
plants.
Yeah.
But are there other, let's say, if they're going to be sitting out here on an evening, are there plants to even plant around a space like this?
Yeah, so there aren't any plants really to keep mosquitoes away. You often will see that advertised as mosquito repellent plants. They tend to be geraniums that they say will do that, and the citronella geranium. And the only way that that's going to work is if you took the leaves and rubbed them on your skin. That will maybe keep them away. But just by having a geranium around, it's not going to keep mosquitoes away. So that's why this could be a nice big screened porch. Keep the mosquitoes out. And other than that, though, there are plants that are companion plants. So you mentioned the nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are great to grow with squashes like summer squash and zucchinis, because there's one insect that really loves squashes, the squash vine borer, actually two, and the squash bug. And they have a hard time finding the squashes if you have nasturtiums growing around them, especially if you have them big and flowering, because they give off a scent. And it's not like the scent repels them, but it masks the scent of the zucchini, so they can't find the zucchini, and they fly over and go somewhere else.
Nice.
So there are examples of that are around that work well. Another one is putting basil around your tomato plants to keep the tomato hornworms away. So if you put 4 or 5 basil plants around them and let them get really big, it has a scent that the tomato hornworm moth can't lay the egg on the tomato plant, and so you can just leave them there and not have to worry about them.
But you need a couple of plants, it sounds like.
Yeah,
I have just one right now.
Yeah, and
so
one's not going to do it.
Darn.
Yeah,
okay.
so we have to think big. So if you want to fill that rest of that bed with basil plants, that probably would help.
Okay.
And you'll have to just see. You might up here in the highlands of Berlin not have tomato hornworms.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a
Impressed.
tomato hornworm as a pet once.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was that big. It was enormous.
Did it do the whole chrysalis thing? And
Yeah, and then we sadly lost it. But that's for another show. Carol asks, will you be doing this again?
In fact, Carol, we will. Yes, next month, the end of July, we'll be looking for another garden with a different theme. And we will be going there and doing a similar kind of thing, walking around, answering questions, kind of giving some tips about the garden. And we'll be doing it a third time the end of August. And actually that one might be turning into a little bigger event. Might be food, there might be drink, there might be
music.
dancing.
Yeah. dancing, yes. E. Harris says, how close, you were just mentioning, to putting those basil plants to try to deter some things. How close do you plant basil to the tomato plants?
Well, if you plant them too close, then the tomato is going to just overwhelm them. So you're going to have to put them, depending on the tomato you're growing, if you're growing one of those big heirloom varieties, probably a foot or two away. If you're growing a dwarf variety or a smaller variety, you can put them a little closer. They don't have to be right up against them, but they have to be in the vicinity of that tomato, and let the plants get the Genovese basils, the ones that get really big. Just let them go. Just let them get big. Don't pick them. I know you want to pick them and eat them, but don't.
I've always found basil to be finicky with water and sunlight.
same.
What are the right growing conditions?
They like a lot of sun.
Okay.
And they like well-drained soil. So people tend to overwater them sometimes, or we get a lot of rain sometimes, and they tend to rot. You'll see it right at the base near the soil line. The stem will start rotting. So make sure the soil is really well drained and they get a lot of sun, and they'll do well. And don't rush to put them out. They don't like cold weather. They don't like cold nights. So you can wait till even this time of year. I just planted some basil we had and some extras to put out. And they'll catch up, and they'll eventually, by August, September, you'll be making so much pesto, everyone will be over.
Pesto and rhubarb pie.
Yeah.
Pesto and rhubarb. A rhubarb pesto. That's a good idea.
This is an interesting one, and I'd love to know the answer to this too. Does cedar mulch deter pollinators? E. Harris writes, I want to mulch, but I also want bees and butterflies.
Yeah, that's a good question. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Cedar mulch does have a scent that can disturb or deter some certain insects, but I've never heard of them specifically deterring pollinating insects. So I wouldn't worry about it. And then, of course, once you put the cedar down after a few weeks or so, that odor, that aroma is going to dissipate.
Right.
And so it'll just be a wood mulch.
Just one more question, and I think probably we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
Unless some other questions come in. But this one's from Nancy and Randolph. This is a good one to end on a summer night as we're sitting outside.
Yeah.
Any tips on how to minimize black flies?
Oh, black flies. I think there's a black fly festival, isn't there?
I think so,
somewhere in
yeah.
Vermont?
Yeah,
I think
Adamant.
Adamant, yep.
Yeah, Adamant, right, exactly.
Bye.
Well, I would go to the festival and find out what they do. Not much, really. There's, unless you're doing repellent sprays and that kind of stuff. The nice thing about black flies is they only last for a few weeks or so, and then they move on, and then the mosquitoes come. And then after the mosquitoes, if you're out in the field, the deer flies are there, and then it snows, and that's the end of the summer. But there's nothing specifically for black flies.
Okay.
Nice. Another question?
And one last
more
question.
question. Okay.
Nancy and Randolph asking, aside from fencing, anything else that you can recommend to deter woodchucks?
Deter woodchucks. So yeah, the fencing is the main thing, doing that around the property.
Yeah.
You can sometimes irritate them. I've had this happen in my house. I had woodchucks in my old house once, and they moved in, and I found where the hole was and everything. So I started throwing things down there, like not garbage, but like smelly cabbages and stuff like that. And actually, if you soak tennis balls in ammonia and throw a tennis ball down there, they don't like the smell of ammonia, and they can't push it out.
Yeah.
Because normally they just push things out that they don't like because it rolls back down. Right. And for whatever reason, they did take off. They did not hang around. So trying to make it a little more inhospitable for them might work.
Or do they, they're aerating the ground essentially while they're tunneling. Does that help with gardening at all?
Not
Or no,
really,
you're
no.
just tripping in the holes. Okay.
You're just, tripping and breaking your ankle.
Yeah, just a couple of messages saying thanks for sharing your garden, Marian and Ben, and that, folks were happy to see your space and be able to share it this evening. So
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Well,
Happy to have
thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank
It's
you.
great. It's nice you'd spend it. It's a perfect night for it, too.
is, yeah.
And thanks for everyone who's come to All Things Gardening Live. And like we said, we'll be back in a month. And so write down your questions and get them ready and listen to the radio show every week on Sunday mornings.
Yep.
Take care. Have a good night. Bye.